Have any people ever been hurt in this thing?
Of course not. This is the first time I've ever tried it on people. Well, I'll be.
This must be that Woodstock place Mom and Dad are always talking about.
Oh, great. I'm stuck in colonial times. Tentacles are taking over the world. Time for me to save the world, I guess.
I thought I was free of Dr. Fred and those crazy Edisons forever. But now, I know that I must go back to the mansion.
Well, what possible harm could one insane mutant tentacle do?
I feel like I could take all the world.
This is a job for Pajama Sam.
Hey everybody, it's Ron with Ron's Computer Videos. I want to thank you for taking time out of your afternoon and joining us here. Let's get right to the interview. He's an author, an award-winning game designer, and part of the reason why the American flag now looks like a windsock, Mr. Dave Grossman. Dave, how are you today, sir?
I am doing very well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. And just to make sure that nobody gets the wrong idea, if you're a Day of the Tentacle fan, you know exactly what that reference is. It's a little bit of time bending. You get Betsy Ross involved, and all of a sudden you've got a tentacle costume now back in the present day.
It's an absurd puzzle.
It is, but it's a lot of fun. And as a younger guy, it took me a minute to figure that out. But once I did, it made perfect sense. I was like, oh, okay. It's one of those things, and that's what I really like about kind of that LucasArts style, is that puzzles didn't feel punitive. It felt like it was like, you'll get there, but you might have to use the tiniest bit of little, stretches of logic.
Yeah, that's been part of the philosophy from way back. Certainly the puzzles are there to entertain you, and we put a lot of effort into sprinkling stuff around them that was going to hint you gradually to the answer if you didn't get it. I feel like that's a skill that I've developed over many years, starting back with things like Day of the Tentacle, but it's getting better and better.
Well, Dave, let's start at the beginning. Actually, I want to thank you because, again, you've been instrumental on some of my very favorite games. From kind of my early PC days all the way up through today. We'll get to all of it. So thank you again. But how did you get started with computers?
Oh, I became a computer kid. I was 13, and my mother got into the field. She was like going back into the workforce. Had always been interested in computers herself, I guess, and sort of went to school and went to work for one of these big mainframe companies, which is kind of all there was. This is the 70s, so there weren't so many personal computers yet. And she brought home a thing to work on. It was like a terminal, like the size of a big typewriter, but it weighed, even more than a regular typewriter does. And you plugged your phone into some suction cups in the back, and you dialed up a 300 baud to the mainframe back at the company. And you did work on it. And it didn't have a monitor. It printed out stuff on that thermal paper. Mm-hmm. And she brought home a bunch of that. And So she let me tinker around on it, and there was a copy of Adventure, Colossal Cave Adventure on that machine, and I used up a bunch of rolls of that thermal paper playing that game. And she was like, my bosses they're starting to take notice of how much of the paper I'm using. Could you tone it down a little, please? And she just kind of showed me how stuff worked, and I learned a computer language. It was APL. And I wrote a copy of, I wrote my own version of Hunt the Wumpus back then. And mine was slightly superior to the original. It had some more maps, not that the structure of the maps in that game is all that important. And you were allowed to attack the Wumpus with your bare hands if you wanted to. You had a very tiny chance of success. And the whole program was probably 100 lines of code. You know, it's a tiny, tiny little thing. But that was sort of my first toe into the water, and I was hooked, really, because I was fascinated by this idea that it was the computer itself was just sort of a black box, and you could just give it instructions to do whatever you wanted it to do, and it would do it. And that I just thought was this fascinating creative opportunity.
Absolutely.
So I knew immediately that that was what I was going to do with my life, was going to computers and tinker with them. I didn't know I was going to make games for a long time after that, but I did know I was going to do computers. They were fun.
And that seems to be a lot of people's story, is that they kind of started out and they were very interested just kind of in the dawn, the early era of computing, and when personal computers, home computers kind of became a thing, you know, like sitting down and just hammering out some very simple programs, and then just like realizing that that was their calling. So I'm glad that you had a similar experience, but it's I'm one of those people that played around with Logo and stuff, and did a lot of programming in the Apple II days, and so I
picked up a Commodore 64 eventually, and I wrote a program. I drew a little Coke can, and I wrote a program to drive it around the screen with a joystick, and yeah, just was satisfying. That's all it was, but
yeah,
it was fun to do.
That's very cool. Well, you've been kind of a like a kind of a free agent, really, as a programmer over the years. Can you tell us a little bit about joining Lucasfilm Games?
Well, that was yeah. So I had gone to Berkeley and gotten a degree in electrical engineering and computer science, and then I took a year off to like play in bands and paint T-shirts and stuff. And then I went to graduate school at San Diego, where I intended to study artificial intelligence, actually, which is becoming topically appropriate again. I went there because I was in a master's program, but I went there because they had a cognitive science PhD program, and my ultimate goal was to like build a brain out of silicon. I thought this was going to be super cool. And somewhere in that year between undergrad and graduate, I kind of lost my taste for just being in school and academics in general. Academia was going to be my career, and I was sort of paying attention to what my professors did all the time, and publishing and all this stuff. I was like, you know, I don't actually think I want to do this after all. And so I just dropped out and went looking for a fun job. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, except that I didn't want to like design missile systems or something like that. I just felt like I don't want to be contributing to big problems. Sure. So I went back up to Berkeley. There was a career center there, and it was just housed in one of these temporary buildings, like a big trailer that they trucked in and stuck some steps onto the front of. And there were just like boxes and boxes of paper solicitations for jobs, and I was looking through the computer folder, and there was one from Lucasfilm. They were like, "Hey, we're hiring a few folks to come and make games here. Please apply." So I was like, "All right, great. That sounded like a good thing," and I applied. And for some reason, they actually hired me to do that. And it was like a It was sort of an internship program. Like their whole idea was we've published Maniac Mansion, and we're about to publish this Indiana Jones game. We've got this SCUMM system, and we think this is a good way to kind of make more games. Mm-hmm. So we're just going to hire some people and teach them to use it and see what they do. And so that was me and Tim Schafer and a couple of other people. And they were like, let's just put them in an office and teach them to use this thing and cut them loose.
Well, it's I recently spoke with David Fox, and he's one of the kind of the original SCUMM programmers for Maniac Mansion, and he was like, even he was sort of like, there was so much potential in this that you could just build anything that you kind of wanted to build on top of it. Just this interface really kind of made it simple to kind of like have a template by which you could kind of put other properties and stuff into that.
Mm-hmm. And I think David is really the one who was responsible for me having a job, honestly. Like, he was the hiring manager officially. Mm-hmm. But the project leaders were all the ones who were sort of interested in, like, we're going to be working with these people. So I went in for the interview, and it was like me and a row of people on the other side of the table. Very intimidating. And I was fairly intimidated, actually, and also half asleep because it was early in the morning. And so I don't think I did that well in the interview. And I remember it was Ron Gilbert who he put his pencil down on my resume and was like, well, I've got a thing. I got to get out of here. Nice to meet you. And he left. And one by one, they all did the same. And I would later learn that, like, putting your pencil down on the resume was some kind of a signal of, like, nah.
Oh, okay.
And I just got the feeling that it had not gone well, and I was on my way out. And I was like, with David, he was showing me, I was like, look, I may not have come out all that well in this interview, but I really want this job. I think it'll be fantastic to do this. So please hire me. And then he did. A few weeks later, called me up and said, we will pay you peanuts, but if you will accept peanuts, then you can come work here. I was like, yeah, all right, I'm in.
Well, it was kind of one of those things where it was, they had a few successes under their belt, but nothing like what was to come. So, I mean, you've got like Ball Blazer, and you've got, Rescue on Fractalus and things. But I mean, you did have Maniac Mansion and Zach McCracken that kind of like broke through. That's
true. And those were kind of setting a style that the company would then follow. But also, I mean, you got to realize that the whole computer market was just unfolding like a little eggs. Sure. Having a computer in your house was still a pretty unusual thing to do. So it was hard to have a hit. A hit was like, we got 6,000 people to buy this game, and there are only 8,000 people who have computers. So that's great.
It was like a really cool era. We're just like, we'll throw things at the wall, we'll see what sticks. And take chances on young talent and stuff. And because again, these are the folks that might have an idea or like a unique way of looking at this. It was kind of that era where there was no wrong answers. It was just sort of like, let's just try.
And also at Lucasfilm was particularly well positioned for that because they had this giant, already successful film company on the budget of which we were just a footnote. It's just like, let's just throw some money at those guys. It's sort of interesting. I guess Atari gave George $1 million to do something. And he started the division with that. And then it was like, okay, we can just fund this. And so we weren't at the beginning under a lot of pressure to like do anything commercial or turn a profit. We weren't allowed to make games based on Star Wars because the rights to those things were being sold for lots of money to other companies. So it was very free. It was like we were all at summer camp and just kind of doing weird creative projects with each other. So we could kind of please ourselves and do stuff that felt cool to us.
That's good. That's really, it's also, I kind of heard it termed that it was like the budget for Lucasfilm Games was more or less a rounding error for like the total budget of like Lucasfilm as a company. But maybe it is good that, Parker Brothers and Atari and companies like that had the Star Wars licenses kind of tied up for a while. So that way that it did sort of force like, some internal sort of creativity and to just try things to see what was going on. But kind of to that,
I didn't go there to make more Star Wars either. Like I guess I would have been okay with that. I was a Star Wars fan as a kid. I was 12 when the movie came out, so it was like the perfect target audience for it. But by the time I was a grown up and working and stuff, I was like, yeah, okay, that was a fun movie, but let's move on and let's make some other stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, kind of by that time, it's, Return of the Jedi was out and stuff like that. And it was sort of like, we've kind of bookended this little trilogy of things. And so what's next? and it's unfortunately it was Howard the Duck. No, but
Oh man, but well, say what you will about that movie. The movie is
it's a great movie. It's got great effects and things like it. It just didn't find an audience at the time.
It's funner than people give it credit for.
Yes.
I was a little disappointed, I guess, because I was a fan of the Howard the Duck comic books. I actually have a complete run of those still in my house somewhere. Just thought Steve Gerber was awesome, and his ideas don't really come through in the movie. It's not the same kind of thing. But yeah, Howard the Duck. Woo.
Yeah, Howard the Duck. But more of this thing where it's just like we're going to try stuff and see what's going on. Can you talk to us a little bit about the run up in the development on Secret of Monkey Island?
Sure. Well, the run up. Wow. I and my compatriots in the SCUMM office, there were 4 of us, learning to use the system, and I think they were kind of looking over our shoulders to see what we would do with what they had taught us. And one day, Ron Gilbert came in and just kind of tapped me and Tim on the shoulders and said, I want you guys to make a game with me. It's about pirates. What do you say? And we were like, yes, please. And so, that was he showed us the design doc, which was still pretty rudimentary, and was like, let's get going. I don't know what to say about the run up really.
Or just the development. It's just sort of like you've got this idea, and it was like, and how things kind of grew, and maybe what some of the challenges were.
We got to do a bunch of research, I remember, which was fun. And we went to the main house. There was like a screening room it was really tiny, but super duper comfortable. You fit about 5 or 6 people in there, and it smelled like wine casks in there, and it was like totally soundproof and on a different piece of concrete from the rest of the building, so you could turn stuff up really loud. And we watched old Errol Flynn movies and stuff like that, and we talked a lot about the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland, because Ron's whole pitch for it was, what if you got off of that ride and you just walked around in that world and you could talk to all the people and kind of solve puzzles and do stuff in there. And we're like, yeah, okay, sounds good. And then we started with Melee Island. I remember everybody was working on Melee Island for a little while, so it's that's why it's sort of the richest, I think. And it's got the most people on it also.
Well, it's your hub, so it makes sense.
Yeah, it's your hub. And I remember there was, when we started to write the dialogue, like that was not a thing that we knew was going to go as well as it did. But I think Ron picked us just because we seemed to be guys with senses of humor that would match this what he wanted for this game. And so we started in on the writing, and I remember on one side of the room, Tim was doing Stan's sales dialogue for buying the ship. And on the other side of the room, yeah, exactly, yeah, 6 arms. And on the other side of the room, I was doing the Fettuccine brothers in the circus arguing with each other back and forth. And we were watching each of us what the other was doing and kind of learning from each other. And people started to kind of trickle in and look over our shoulders, and they were chuckling the whole time. And I think that's when everybody knew, like, okay, yeah, this is going to be fun, and we can kind of see where the fun is in it. Here's where the humor is going to come from. Eventually, I got tasked with, like, okay, let's start Monkey Island. So I moved over to Monkey Island and started setting all that up. And to be clear, like, what Tim and I were doing was, we would all get together and we would brainstorm puzzles together. And then we would go off, and it was up to Tim and me to wire up each room. So somebody would give us some background art and some characters, and we would like draw, here's where they walk. And we got to program all the things that are going to move. And then we would set up all the dialogues and wire up the puzzles so that they would work. A lot of programming stuff. And then as part of that, it's like there's a little bit of sort of blocking out a play that goes on. Like, oh, if there's a cutscene in this room, then you got to write the cutscene, give the characters some dialogue, make them walk back and forth, and you had about 3 gestures that they could do. You know, they could all put their arms high or medium or low, and that was about it. Maybe you could crouch down. And so a lot of the interaction between the people was done just by kind of walking them back and forth. And you could do a lot with that if you're in 16 color land. A character like turns and walks away and stops, and the other character follows, and that says a lot, right?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a big part of storytelling. It's show not tell.
Yeah.
On some of the visual medium. So it's animating your characters and stuff like that goes a long way, especially with the limitations of the era. So
yeah. So then we got to working on Monkey Island, and it immediately became apparent, like, okay, we can wire up all the puzzles, and you can walk around, you can look at stuff and say funny lines, and you're looking at them, but there's hardly anyone to talk to. There's some cannibals off in a village that you don't meet for quite a while, and there's this castaway who keeps wandering into frame and saying 2 lines and then escaping before you can really talk to him. And I realized this is a big problem. Like, this island is empty by design, but it feels empty because nobody's talking. So that's why there are little things like Herman and the cannibals are leaving notes for each other, and you keep finding them. It's just like, let's put something in there to try and juice it up a little bit, so you don't feel like you've lost all that character magic from the islands that you were on before.
It's I like it. I think that the humor is pretty consistent through the entire game. There's a lot of games of that era that kind of like fall down in the third act. But I really think that Monkey Island is one of those games that it's consistently good through the entire game. And as you kind of complete those chapters and keep getting pushed forward, there's at least there's new challenges, but of course we're going to make sure that we've got like callbacks on other things that were earlier in the game. So the characters and everything, I'm going to say it's like a Ghostbusters kind of thing where it's like lightning in a bottle. Everything came together just right to make this just very memorable experience that people are still talking about decades later.
I'm a little surprised too that it's as consistent as it is, because the 3 of us had kind of just started working together, and with similar senses of humor, but not exactly the same. And I definitely we weren't writing exactly the same way as each other, but we did sort of fall into this common habit of lots of in-jokes about stuff around the office or references to other Lucasfilm properties. We just felt like there was a lot of that was going on.
Let me see if I can find my Ask Me About Loom button. It's around here somewhere.
Exactly. I got one of those here too. Yeah. So yeah, I think we all kind of learned from each other quite a bit on that project and developed a style that went forward.
Well, it's again, it's somebody that was on the receiving end of all of this talent. I very much appreciate it, because again, it's a funny game. It really spoke to me as a young person playing it, that a lot of time and effort and love kind of went into the production of that. So it's really great. But you worked on other projects while you were there. Like the list of LucasArts stuff that you've worked on. Of course, there's the sequel, LeChuck's Revenge, which really ups the game in terms of like the kind of the graphic fidelity of the game. My understanding is that there was a lot of stuff that started as real drawings, scanned in.
Yeah.
And then
that was when we bought the scanner. Yeah. It cost $10,000, and it had its own like little area over in the art building. And you had to like book time on it if you wanted to use it for anything. And you had to be, trained, because they didn't want anybody breaking the $10,000 scanner. And I was in there like at night making desktop backgrounds for my Mac Plus. That was good fun. But we did the art was all done as like these I think it was gouache paintings, and then scanned in and touched up on the computer afterwards. It's a completely new process for us. It's all pretty exciting.
Yeah, I'm sure it also saved a lot of production time, just because you could start with like a nice high resolution thing, and you just kind of squish it down to where you needed it to be, and then just I just remember
Well,
seeing it compared to the
squish
original
it-
Monkey Island.
Squish it down is.
Squish it.
I think that's more of a modern concept. You have
Yeah.
software that just handle that stuff. We didn't have a whole
Right.
lot going
Yeah.
for us then. There was Photoshop was around. I think they had just released it, and somebody came over from the other building to. It was one of the guys who had written it, just to kind of give us an idea of what some of the features were for, and we learned how to use raw mode and stuff like that. So, yeah, that was it was interesting times. They were pretty cavalier about that art, by the way. I went just a couple of years later to give a talk to a 5th grade class. My young nephew was in it. And they let me take a bunch of that original art and pass it around to these kids, kids, just like, here's how we make the art, and here's some examples of what it looks like, and it's crazy.
Well, I guess they're like, we're done with it. It's like so many. Well, the show wrapped. You strike the sets. We've moved on to the next thing. You would think that with the archive, though, it's especially like LucasArt or Lucasfilm, with just we keep one of everything sort of thing. That they would have been a little more forward thinking about the video game division, but hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah, that stuff was all just kind of sitting in a flat file.
Yeah.
Around.
Well, it's really cool. That would have been a very neat day of like show and tell. It'd be like, oh yeah, here's this game. Please buy a copy on your way home tonight.
Right. Yeah, it was. I think I took the teacher a little by surprise. I didn't have really any experience giving talks about anything at that point, and so I didn't really know how to gauge the time well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she expected me to come in and do 10 or 15 minutes, and I basically took up her entire class period. I talked for an hour to like show them all this stuff. So,
well, if it's interesting, by gosh, and kids are curious and they love that stuff. I do STEM education stuff, and they want to know how things work. And so if you give them the things, and I mean, who knows, you get people excited about stuff, and that it's like your mom bringing the computer home. You never know what you inspire.
Yeah. I did that again many years later. And I'm surprised every time by how savvy that these kids are. They're like 10, but they're asking me like technical questions about what programming languages do we use, and is this C or C++, or what are you doing with this, and what's your development system like? Yeah,
it's like, how much stuff do you put out on GitHub? I'm worried because my archive out there, it's like,
right.
Okay, kids, I'm really glad that you're part of this world. I feel very confident that you'll keep this all going after I'm gone.
Yeah.
But there were several other games that you worked with or helped develop while you were at LucasArts. I know that you kind of had a little bit of involvement with Fate of Atlantis. Maybe that wasn't a project you directly worked on, but
no, it wasn't. I have a credit in it, but I'm not really sure what it's for. I don't remember.
I think it's basically just advice, because at that point you developed a couple of games in SCUMM, and I'm sure that there are people that were like, "Hey, can you tell me what am I doing wrong here?"
Yeah, but that game was being run by Hal Barwood and Noah Falstein, who Noah had been at the company forever.
Mm-hmm.
And Hal had made a bunch of films, and so a bunch of other different kinds of things. And they had Mike Stemley and Sean Clark working, doing all the SCUMM programming and stuff. So I'm not sure what advice they would have wanted for anything. So I don't know. Maybe I was just hanging around and said something funny one day, and they put it in the game, or
maybe they did
that. But
that's another great one. But
I don't put that one on my resume because I don't feel like I can claim any credit at all for any success at that game.
I get it. It's I mean, there's so many other things that absolutely your fingerprints are all over, and one of those, Day of the Tentacle, and that has to be my favorite of that era. I mean, I love the Monkey Island games, don't get me wrong, but Day of the Tentacle, I remember I played the holy hell out of Maniac Mansion back in the day. I had it when it came out for the Nintendo. I got it for the Nintendo just because people were like, "Oh, the music and everything is really great," and I was like, "Yeah, it really is." But Day of the Tentacle, I went over. A friend of mine got it. He had he originally had the floppy version, so we played through the entire floppy version of the game, and then when it came out later on the Talkie, like the CD-ROM copy, by then, had a CD-ROM drive and all the type of stuff, and replayed it again, and I was like, it's even better. It's the voice acting in it. Everything is just really, really great. Do you have anything to share kind of about the development on that?
Well, first I'll say that was simultaneous. The CD version and the floppy version came out at the same time. So you may have gotten it later.
Well, I didn't have a CD-ROM drive at first. Those were still kind of an expensive add-on at the time.
Yeah, and I personally, fitting that game, because we had been working on it already for I think about a year. And it was looking like, okay, we're gonna sort of maybe make our deadline, maybe miss it. And Kelly Flock, who was running the division, came into us one day and said, listen, how about we give you guys a bunch more time and you make this game into a talkie? Because this is a thing that's happening now around the industry, as people are starting to think about putting voice into things, and CDs are becoming a medium that is going to allow us to actually do that. And so we were like, okay, great. That seemed pretty fun. But we were still releasing on floppies, and we had to squash the game down to get it onto, I think it was 6 floppies, which was pretty, that's a lot for those days. And that's, we're not talking about digital distribution. We're talking about actual manufacturing costs. Like, it was making the game expensive. So one of my personal tasks was to make sure that the game would actually fit on those 6 floppies. And I was, it was a little over, and it was a little over. And, the opening and closing bits are talkie on it, but none of the rest of it is. And I was in there like compressing down like individual sound effects to save a couple of K here and a couple of K there, just cutting out whatever I could. And eventually I was like, I've done it. I've gotten it onto 6 floppies. I'm so excited. And then they did the German translation, and it just the text size shot it right back over again, because all of the sentences were twice as long. And I'm pretty sure in Germany that game shipped on 7 floppies. I think we just threw up our hands and were like, we can't.
We had no choice.
Any smaller. But so that was like, it was a turning point for me and Tim, because we had done Monkey Island, we had done Monkey 2, we'd been knocking around the studio for a little while. And they were like, basically like, okay guys, you know what you're doing now. Here's the keys, lead your own project. And just for safety's sake, they had us do it together. So there was only one big risk happening. And they suggested like, well, why don't you do something that's nominally a sequel to Maniac Mansion? I think that was like, let's capitalize on something that we have that's valuable. And also let's rein these guys in a little bit so that they don't get too crazy. And we were like all over that. We were like, yeah, that sounds great. Actually, we love that game. We'll happily make a sequel. But one of the wise pieces of advice that we got was, it's been like 5 years or whatever since that game came out, and the graphics are super dated. So don't worry about anything about the style, or make a sequel, but make it its own thing. And so Peter Chan came on as the lead artist, and he was very excited about all this, old Warner Brothers cartoons and squashing and stretching. And Larry Ahern came in to be lead animator, and was like, we were all just very into that as an influence. And so basically what we set out to do was make something that felt like you had walked into a Chuck Jones animated cartoon. And that affected everything that we did, from not just the art style and the animation, but also the music is very Ray Scott influence. And the puzzles themselves are, you have to, in many cases, think like a character from one of those cartoons in order to succeed. Yes. They're like direct references. You literally paint a stripe down the back of a black cat to make it look like a skunk. And
yes,
these are the kinds of things that are obvious to you if you have watched a bunch of these cartoons, but that may be a little bit difficult if you didn't grow up on them like we all did.
It's absolutely, it spoke to my sense of humor. So I got a lot of those jokes. I understood where it was like, okay, it's okay. I've got the whiteout. I put it on the fence. I get the cat to go through. These guys are afraid of skunks. It all makes sense. It was just sort of like, how do I turn this cat into a skunk? And it's like, all right, that's one way to do it. So
Yeah.
but the I know that the art style and everything is very different. And I remember kind of at the time that in the media that was sort of like in reviews, people were like that you took this thing that was very kind of like beloved, but maybe well worn at this point, and absolutely betrayed expectations with like a more cartoony sort of style, like the special effects, or I'm sorry, the sound effects and things like that. There's a lot of that kind of Warner Brothers sort of like the zoom, and like you were talking about with the animation, like the stretch and things like that, like all of that I absolutely plays like to the benefit of the material for sure, because it's already sort of a sci-fi zany universe that only didn't look like this the first time just because of technical limitations.
Yeah, that comes up in nowadays too. People will be talking to Ron Gilbert about stuff, and they'll be like, why aren't you making this new game in a pixel art style? And he's like, we didn't do pixel art because of anything special about pixel art. It's just like that's the only way you could do art on a computer in those days. Look real blocky because we couldn't move stuff around. To us, it's just art, and that you do whatever is the coolest and most stylistic thing you can do. And then on Tentacle too, we were, technology was continuing to progress. Computers were getting a little bit more powerful, and we still had to kind of target the low end a little bit. Because that's what people had in their homes, and you started to be able to move more pixels around on the screen, but you still you couldn't do any kind of full screen video or anything like that. Like people started to experiment with video kind of right after that, and it would be like a little thing in a window, like screen. And so we have a couple of shots in Tentacle where the entire screen is moving. Like when you're plunging through time, there's a great big rotating thing, but those are accomplished by technical trickery. Like that's not an actual like frame by frame animation happening. There's a background, and we're cycling the color palette to make it look like it's spinning around, and there's an animated thing right in the middle that's actually animated. So
well, it absolutely it punches above its weight in a lot of different ways, and I as somebody that played it back in the day, I was completely blown away by it. Just the humor and the gameplay and the time travel element to it as well. I will admit it took me a little while to figure out how I was supposed to get all of the dimes that were going to be required to spoilers to dry the sweater. It took me a minute to actually, because you have to go through, and you've got to get, oh gosh, you have to get the keys and give them to the burglar or the guy that's trying to break into the car, and get the crowbars so you can go inside, and then you can get the thing. But it was like, to get the keys, it was one of those things where it's a big long chain of events that get you to whatever that thing is, and it's at no point along the way did it feel punitive, that it was like,
right,
like, oh, you're just supposed to know this. It was like all of it was right there in front of you, and like you said earlier, in hindsight you kind of look back at it, and it was just like, oh well, why didn't I know?
And it's in some ways that's not great puzzle design if you're trying to accomplish something, and the first step on the road is not one where you can see the connection at all. But that's kind of how you have to make these things complicated and hard. And I think that as long as you have a reason or a goal that gets you moving on the specific thing that you need to do, that's enough. If it's just like, oh, I'm interested in whatever's in this car or something, find the keys, give them to the guy. Again, that's a sort of a thing, skill we've been refining over the years, and we're still sort of new at in those days. And so some of those puzzles, I think, are a little short on either motivation or information.
Some of them are esoteric, but don't get me wrong. I never felt exasperated when I got to the solution.
Yeah.
That it was something. There were a lot of things of like, why didn't I see this? But it was never sort of a thing where it was just like you complete the puzzle so you can get to the next challenge, where you just felt like you had just been wrung out mentally by whatever that thing was. So the challenge and the sort of the reward felt earned.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a hard thing to convey in some of these games, because
it is a little, yeah. And my personal benchmark on that has always been like, okay, imagine the person solving the puzzle. When they get to the end, their reaction should be, oh, and especially if they've had to look up the solution or something, it should be, oh, I should have thought of that. Mm-hmm. Rather than, what the heck, how was I supposed to think of that?
Yeah. I would say that there are some
like going to the hints and or going to the walkthrough and reading it. I want them to actually have the experience of like, try and solve it. Get into it. I got your back.
Yeah.
Investigate on things.
That's kind of a Sierra thing.
You're doing great.
That's kind of a Sierra thing with like the whole like moon logic. I mean, hold on. I will point out this game does include a monkey wrench.
Oh yeah.
A real monkey
ever.
And I didn't take any offense, but I know that there were a lot of people that were just like I'm stuck and I'm looking for a real tool, and they didn't make that connection.
Yeah. That puzzle is wrong on so many levels that I use it in talks as my example of basically all bad puzzles boil down to that one, because it's got so much wrong with it. And another one of the main things about it is that it relies on a play on words that is both language based and cultural. Mm-hmm. So you have to know that thing you're looking for is called a monkey wrench, and they don't even call it a monkey wrench everywhere in this country, and they definitely don't call it a monkey wrench in England, and they definitely don't call it a monkey wrench anywhere where the spoken language is not English. So yeah, it's a lesson learned. Don't base a puzzle on a pun. You can put puns in all you want, but don't make the puzzle solution rely on it.
You to that, we're removing things from games. I know that the Seventh Guest, for international audiences, they had to remove the more than it just being like a English sort of thing. It would basically, if English wasn't your native language, you'd have to sit there with a thesaurus to basically figure out the cans puzzle in the kitchen, where you're actually spelling something out. So they just took that out of the game rather than have to. And maybe thankfully these days it does include kind of maybe a less than appropriate to use these days word for the Romani people and stuff like that. So it's like, probably it's good we left this out. But at
least they were thinking about it, and that's good. That somebody tested it and was like, oh wait, it's not going to be good.
Yeah,
this is one of the reasons why the French translation of all of those early LucasArts games is so good. Is that the French translator was actually on site. She was in the office next to mine, and so when she was working on Monkey Island, she would come over and she would be like, "This joke is not going to work in French." Just either language-wise or culturally, and she would suggest, a better one. And you're like, all right, that's what it's going to be in the French version now.
Yeah, if it gets us to the goal, let's do it. Right.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this: with all the changes that happened between kind of Maniac Mansion and Day of the Tentacle, there's a lot of that story that gets moved forward. The Edison family makes it, the Tentacles make it, the Mansion makes it. I think that those are set pieces that you absolutely had to have. But maybe the most flexible thing of the game, because of the original title, you would kind of pick your team of kids. You always had to pick Dave, because Dave's girlfriend was who you're ultimately trying to save. Right. But you could also pick other other kids.
Yeah,
Were you part of the process of determining, like, if we're going to bring anybody back from the player characters, who are we going to bring back, and then maybe what that process was of like creating new characters?
Oh yeah, well, yeah. So and in fact, you don't get to pick your team in Day of the Tentacle, but originally you were going to be able to. That was part of the original design. And we brought back Bernard, but just because he was sort of he was good fun. You know, he was kind of the most cartoonish of all the characters, and he had a lot of just character qualities that we thought we could mine for humor, so we wanted him in. And we also brought back Razor. Actually, was going to be in the cast. We just thought she was cool, you know. And then we thought, well, okay, but we should add some new kids. And so, all in all, there were 6 kids. There were the 3 that you get, and plus Razor, and there was Moonglow, and I think Chester were the other 2 who ultimately got cut. And the reason they got cut was we part of the process making these games is project leaders go off and they come up with a design, and then you go before the group of project leaders. You know, the department had a head, but basically all of the decisions creatively about what was going to go forward was down to this group of all the other project leaders, and they would hear your pitch and they would talk about whether it was good or not. And then they would inevitably say, cut 3 characters in 5 locations and you can have the money to build this. You know, I was part of that group too. You know, I would say the same thing to other people. So we were sort of prepared for that even going in. And one of the first things we did was, let's cut 3 of the principal characters actually, and not pick kids, because with all this like crazy time travel stuff, if you're also picking your team, that's just going to make us too insane. There's no way we can make that game anyway. Yeah. So Chester got repurposed. Actually, he became the Edison brothers from the past, Ned
and Zed, or right? It's rhyming names. Yeah.
The right-handed one and the left-handed one, if I remember correctly. And Moonglow unfortunately wound up on the cutting room floor. She's not in the game at all, and Razor went bye too, and we just stuck with the 3 that you got.
Yeah. Well, I know. Did you take any offense, Dave, that they dropped Dave as one of the kids?
No, none of us thought we should have Dave. No. Dave's boring.
Dave had told his story, and it's
exactly,
and you are kind of, and no offense,
Dave and Sandy, they're done, right?
Yeah.
They don't have to.
Well, thankfully they do show up in Thimbleweed Park a number of years later, so you get at least to see that they're doing okay and still together. Yeah. But the I will say, as somebody that played a lot of Maniac Mansion, it is like Dave mostly just hung out in the dungeon the whole time. It's everything was handled by Bernard and Razor, because they seem to be like the most flexible team of people to do things. Because it's like, you know, Bernard, he can fix the radio, he can fix the telephone. The only thing that Bernard can't do is get past the green tentacle, and so you just have Razor go and do those things. She's brave, she can do all that. Yeah. So, you know, she's your kid that runs and does stuff. So I absolutely understand keeping Bernard, because again, like you said, he's kind of the most cartoony. But in the original game, like, I would probably say, I don't know that there's any real numbers, but I would probably say that Bernard would be the first pick for most people that had at least played more than once, that weren't just picking kids based on, you know, some sort of like superficial reasoning. Like, I don't know anybody that beat the game.
Anybody's actually trying to solve the puzzles. They're like, I want that guy.
Yeah, I don't know anybody that beat the game with Wendy and Sid. I don't. I mean, you could. I mean, I mean, but it's hard. That's hard mode. But
you do a poll. Run a poll.
I'm going to. That's what I want to find out. Like, who your Maniac Mansion dream team is. So I'll have to do that. But but no, I really like Laverne. Maybe she incorporates some ideas from maybe some of the other characters. Hoagie is really great, because you need, like, maybe somebody that's like, I'm just the disinterested guy. I'm just here, you know, It was my day off, so I'm along on the adventure. But
Yeah.
I think that they're all very well written. They're funny characters, and they were all a joy to play. And I like where they ended up, because it maybe, Hoagie's a little, maybe he's not like, he's more laid back. He's the slower moving pace character. Stick him in the past. You've got Laverne, who is the weird medical kid, science kid. Stick her in the future with, like, where they're dissecting humans and things. That's already up her alley. So it's I don't think it could have came together any better than it did.
Yeah, one of my favorite bits in the game is just a throwaway thing with Hoagie, where he's talking to dead cousin Ted about his 3-corner hat, and he just he just goes on and on and on, and you get the impression like, oh, he actually doesn't realize this guy's dead and is not going to talk back. He's just chit chatting with him. So
I do think it's at least an achievement in the Steam version that you do have to talk to dead cousin Ted in all 3 sort of time periods.
right.
Yeah, you have to have a conversation with him. But yeah, the Hoagie conversation goes on for a very long time.
Yeah,
where it's, I do love it. I do think it's great, and there's enough callbacks even within the game itself that everything feels earned. Everything feels like it just locks together.
Yeah,
just like no notes.
It does feel like, it's sort of a well-oiled machine of just time travel crazy puzzles. We're all pretty excited about that whole aspect of it. Like endless brainstorming sessions. Like, okay, well, let's go. You could take wine and turn it into vinegar, and we could do this and that. Just great fun.
Yes, it's well, how am I going to turn this? I can't remember, because you have to get the spaghetti, or it's the self-solving puzzle where you need the hair for dead cousin Ted in the future. So you put the spaghetti in the chronogon, and it makes it wet. And so when it gets there, now it's luxurious hair for your mummy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just little stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. Maybe we were just assuming people would try to send it somewhere and would just discover that. Like, oh, look, now it's Floppy. Maybe now I understand what
it's wet. I needed to get it wet, so now it worked. Yeah. It's perfect. It's just perfect. So, but kind of as you later on, maybe like one of the other big projects you worked on there was Full Throttle, and that's a big departure from those earlier titles, because it kind of breaks. It doesn't break. Break is the wrong word. It changes the interface, where it is you are less bound to like the verbs and stuff that you would see in the older titles, and it basically just opens up the world where you are just seeing the game, and it feels much more immersive than earlier games. Do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about the production on that?
Sure. Well, that was mainly Tim's game, really, and I didn't have anything to do with the changes to the interface. In fact, I didn't like the giant medallion. It was just kind of too big, I think, for me. But I did appreciate the sort of simplification from the verbs down to a few actions. And if you want to talk about Pajama Sam a little bit, like that's the game where I sort of felt like we figured out some important stuff about the verbs and how to approach them. But Throttle was, Tim was sort of charging along on that, and I was sort of on my way out really already. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do there, and I decided to take a leave of absence and just figure out my life. It's very it was falling apart in various ways, not just professionally, personally as well. And so I told my boss I wanted to do this, and he said, well, listen, could you don't leave right away, because Tim is overwhelmed with this project, just directing it, and he keeps putting off starting the script. And so we think if he just had like a draft to throw everything out on and mess with, that would help him. So I basically did a first draft of the script of the entire game over the course of it was probably about 6 weeks. I'm gonna say. And some of that is still in there. Actually, he didn't throw out all of it, but you know, and it was sort of a rudimentary approach to the characters that he then took and made magical. I don't want to claim any credit for any of that. What is still in there is my the sea shanty that Corley is singing when he gets killed. Is still my original lyrics for that, and I have a special credit, I think, in the at the end of the game just for that. And then so I went on this bike trip where I left from my house here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I rode all the way up into Canada. And this took about 6 weeks. I was out just kind of figuring out my stuff and whether I wanted to keep working at Lucasfilm or not. And I had more or less decided that I didn't want to do that I wanted to be freelance and focus on more writing and design and less directing, but especially I think producing. Like the whole idea of like, I'm going to be on this game for more than a year and I've got to be responsible for the budget and always be like, I didn't like any of that stuff. I didn't want to do any of it. And towards the end of that trip, I stopped by Ron Gilbert's house. He had moved to Seattle to start Humongous. We had a few conversations, and I said, well, I'm thinking about leaving. And he was like, well, I can't really talk to you until you actually do leave because I am contractually not allowed to poach people. But, you know, give me a call. Right. So I was like, all right. So I went back and I quit immediately. But then the very first thing that I did as a freelancer was work on Full Throttle some more because they called me up and were like, well, okay, I know you're not working here anymore, but we've got this scene in the game which is a demolition derby, and the only people who could possibly pull this off using the SCUMM system we think are you and Tim, and Tim's busy. He's directing the game, so how about that, will you do it? And I was like, okay, you know, I'll try it. So I spent about a month, I think, working on that, just on that one scene. And the thing about the SCUMM system is it's really not designed for any kind of action at all. And we had discovered this on The Secret of Monkey Island because we tried to put a ship battle sequence in there where you would, you know, kind of sail a ship around and try and navigate around to get your guns trained on the other guy while he was trying to do the same to you. And it never quite worked out because there's all this math that you got to do, you know, polar coordinates, and the SCUMM system only handled integers and only within a range up to, you know, 64,000, and so I had to essentially fake this whole system. And I was doing some of the math for real, but I kept having to kind of rescale the numbers to fit into the numerical space where I could actually manipulate them and not lose everything to round off error, and then scale them back again. And so the scene works, but it's still fairly clunky. And I believe they put into the game a way to skip it if you're just having too much trouble. But it was kind of fun. You know, there's this whole thing you got to do where you got to cripple a car and then push it up onto a ramp and over onto somebody. That's actually quite hard to do.
I will say that is maybe a frustrating part of the game. It is. I don't know that it's more frustrating than the crane, because there's a crane puzzle where you actually have to pick up the cars and drop them to try to trap a dog in the trunk of the car.
Right,
and it's because at least the demolition derby, you're kind of a top-down view, so I can figure out exactly where this exists in space. But the crane puzzle is like requires depth perception as well, in something that is very clearly 2D. So but I didn't really have an issue. It's, you know, because it is largely kind of scripted, the demo derby, because it's like the cars could only move a certain way. So you might go through and bump them around once or twice and be like, okay, I now understand the rules of the system. I can now play and do this.
Yeah, they are responding to your movements in a very specific way, so that you have a prayer of navigating them into the right spot.
I was going to say, if there was a big AI on the other side of this, it would just be too frustrating to try to do this puzzle. So, No, I think that Full Throttle is again, it's one of those classic games, and it feels very cinematic, but by design.
Yep.
That it's like you're playing a movie. And so if you were somebody that liked Monkey Island and you like it's pirates, and then it's like in Full Throttle is bikers.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you know, but it seems like that there was a lot of things that were just like, we always wanted to try this, we always wanted to do this, and this is going to be the platform by which we're going to do it, because there's kind of like Road Rash, where there's a little area that you have to go through, and you've got to fight the other bikers, and you've got to like know what weapon that they're sort of you know, like not immune to, you know, that they're more susceptible to taking damage from.
Right.
So you can get the items, you can unlock the next puzzle. So it's part action and the puzzles and just the dialogue and just the story element of it. Really great.
Yeah.
You brought up.
You can thank Tim for all that stuff.
Yeah, maybe one day. But
I
do know that you'd brought up about leaving Lucasfilm, or at that time LucasArts, to join Rob Gilbert over there at Humongous Entertainment. Do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about writing for games like Pajama Sam and Freddy Fish, and those games largely are kind of SCUMM in a way?
Yeah.
And just kind of like writing interactive fiction for a younger audience.
Yeah, they're not kind of SCUMM. They actually are SCUMM. That's the they took the SCUMM system with them. Ron made a sweetheart deal with them to be able to use it. I think agreed to maintain it for LucasArts for some period of time in exchange for he could also do whatever he wanted with it on his own. And he kind of gutted it, you know, took out a lot of the stuff that he wasn't going to use, and then kept the bare bones. But the scripting stuff was all pretty much the same. And those, like I mentioned, the interface of Pajama Sam, and I still maintain this is one of the cleanest interfaces there is, where there just aren't verbs, because a thing that I eventually realized was that verbs and inventory are kind of doing the same purpose. Like if you want to accomplish a thing, you take something out of your inventory and you use the thing on it. And so anytime you pick up an inventory object, you're really just gaining another verb. So, you know, why have those original verbs? You don't really need those. You don't use most of them anyway. You just kind of click on a thing and you sort of know what you mean. Like, oh, I'm going to use that, or if it's a door, I'm going to open it. If it can be picked up, I'm going to take it. And you don't need a whole heck of a lot other than that. If you want to talk about something, you just take the thing and show it to somebody. And Pajama Sam makes use of all of that stuff, which I think is great and simple, and I love it. So I didn't set out to become a children's game author. I didn't specifically set out to go work for Humongous either. I mean, I knew Ron and I liked working with him, and he had expressed some interest while I was on that bike trip. So I was like, great, but I quit just because I needed to quit. And actually, the first two things that Ron and I did together were not kids games. We actually designed and wrote complete scripts for a pair of games around a couple of characters called Bobo and Fletcher. And those games were never made. Like, this was sort of his early cave dog thoughts. He was like, we have this successful children's game company. We want to make some games for grown-ups. Let's start with these. And we somehow never quite got around to making those. Total Annihilation got made, I think, instead. So then one day, though, he called me up and he was like, I know you're not like that super into this kid stuff that we do, but we've got this new character that we're gonna do, and we think he should be kind of weird. The writing should be quirky, and you're kind of weird and quirky. And how about it? Do you want to write it? I was like, okay. I wasn't doing anything else at that moment. I'm like, all right, sounds good. I'll give it a shot. And it was so much fun. I can't even tell you. And the way it went this time, like subsequent projects that I did with them, we would have like a summit where either I would go up there or they would come down here, and we would kind of bang out all the puzzles and the story over the course of just a few days. And then I would go off and I would write the script for 12 weeks. And this time they already had a lot of the puzzles and story stuff in place. And so it was just like, we need somebody to breathe life into all these characters and, you know, make them fun, make them really sparkle. So again, I had about 12 weeks, and I took some, I think, stylistic inspiration from Lewis Carroll, really, as to how I wanted to approach the characters. You'll notice in, like, with characters like there's a wishing well who's sort of endlessly pouring water into himself from a stream in order to feed the stream that comes back, and they've all got this, you know, kind of circular logic about things, and they're all kind of locked in their own. They got blinders on about certain things, and I always thought that was very funny and a kind of humor that kids could appreciate.
Absolutely.
And so I leaned pretty heavily on that. And then one of the interesting challenges about writing a game like this for kids is we expected that the parents would be playing with them in a lot of cases. And we realized we needed to entertain the parents too. And you can't always do that with just kid jokes endlessly. And so the trick is to put stuff in for the parents in such a way that either the kids will not notice that they're missing anything, or that they'll just find it funny in a different way. Like, oh, these words sound funny, or this sounds like nonsense to me, even though it makes more sense to my dad. So there was a lot of that. And that was very fun to do. I have encountered people in later life who grew up on these games, and I remember there was a pair of women at a convention like, oh, we love these games, and I was like, listen, were your parents playing? Oh, well, they were like, yeah, they're playing with us, but not on their own. I was like, oh, our mom's here. And then they sent the mom over, and the mom said, I was playing the game on my own after they went to bed, and I didn't tell them. It was like, yes, okay, mission accomplished.
That's how you know you did it, because it's that multi-generational appeal of a lot of this. And you know what? Like more now than ever, like what they call like wholesome gaming or like comfy kind of titles and things like that are all the rage these days. So people love, like, you know, where it's just like, I'm gonna sit down and it's a game where you pet a cat. And it's like, you know, like I'm allergic to cats, or, you know, or it's I'm not allowed to have cats in my building or something like that. And so I just like the experience of this, and it's just relaxing. And I think a lot of people get that kind of enjoyment even still today from like the Freddy Fish games and Pajama Sam and like Putt Putt and all of those titles, because it's either something they remember, or it's like there's not like a huge level of challenge to it. And it's just something you can kind of play through and just let it kind of wash over you without like being stressful.
There was I was in a conversation some years later around, I think it might have been around the children's books that eventually got written. And somebody was in the meeting from like marketing or something, who was saying that they loved Pajama Sam. You know, he was such a great kid, and he had, you know, with attitude or something like that. And this was like at a time where that was like a marketing buzzword that you heard everywhere, attitude or edge or something like that. And I just had to stop, and I was like, no, actually that's exactly one of the great things about Pajama Sam is that he has no attitude. He doesn't give anybody lip about anything. You know, he's always helpful and always trying to do the right thing, even though sometimes he doesn't. And what I think you're responding to is just that he has enthusiasm and energy, and those are good qualities. And don't confuse them with attitude, because it's not the same thing.
Please don't poochie my game.
Yeah.
So after Humongous Entertainment, I know that you did a lot of work with Telltale Games, working on Tales of Monkey Island and The Walking Dead, and lots of other games that they had. What was that kind of experience like? Because it's adventure gaming, it's interactive fiction, but those games very much work in a different manner, with, like, you know, where decisions that you make affect things later in the game. I mean, you're always going to one destination, but it really felt like you had a lot of choice in how you got there.
Yeah, well, Telltale sort of had a couple of phases. Um, I came in kind of early on, like not right at the beginning, but fairly early because I'd been freelancing by that point for like 11 years, I think. And I discovered that one of the things I don't like about that is always looking for the next thing. And so it seemed like, and I'd settled down by now, and I was like, having a steady income would be a good thing. And here's a company that is run by some friends of mine, and they're going to be making the kind of game that I like to work on all the time. Story games. I just want to do story games. Just give me more story games to do. So I joined them, and at first it was just kind of adventure games, but with the caveat that because they were going to be serialized, episodic, we were calling them, but really serialized is probably a better word, and distributed online, they needed to be things that you really could get through in just a few hours. They couldn't be very long because you needed to be finished with them by the next month when the next one came out. And that schedule was very deliberately based on the release schedule of comic books, which we thought was kind of the closest paradigm of like, you get an issue and you sort of go through it, maybe you chew over it for a little while, and then you just sort of relax, and maybe it's in the back of your mind for a little bit, and then another one comes along and you're like, all right, yeah, and you keep going. So that was we weren't doing that right at the beginning because we didn't have the sort of technical or logistical pipeline set up to even be able to do that. It's a very, very hard problem to make games in that way. So the first thing that I did there was a game called The Great Cow Race. It was Jeff Smith's Bone was the license. It was actually the second one that the studio had done. And this is another game where you have three different characters, the Bone Brothers, and you kind of swap back and forth between them. And there's all this sort of intricate design, and like each of them gets things that the other one needs, and you got to trade stuff back and forth. And it's all, it's I'm pretty pleased with how that game came out. And it contains the interesting struggle with that one was there is, as you might expect in a game called The Great Cow Race, there is a cow race. And because this is based on a series of comic books, you are going to lose the cow race, but it's like everything is sort of leading up to the cow race and you want to win it. And so it was an interesting sort of story versus puzzles, player goals cannot be satisfied kind of thing. And we realized what we had to do was sort of mid-race change the stakes so that you like winning is no longer important. It's more just survival. And if you survive, then you're going to feel like that's a win and go from there. After that game, the rights to Sam & Max freed up. And so what that was about was the people who started Telltale had been working on a Sam & Max title, and it got canceled, and the company said, well, you can stay here and work on something else. And the guy said, no, I think we're going to go form our own company, and we're going to work on some stuff on our own. And the deal with Steve was, I think, they had to do something, Lucas had to do something with the license within 2 years, and where the rights reverted back to him again. And so they just waited out the 2 years because Lucasfilm didn't have any real motivation to make a Sam & Max game. So great, let's do a property that belongs to somebody else and pay them money when we could just be doing an original thing instead. Didn't make sense for them. So as soon as that happened, it was like, all right, we're gonna do Sam & Max, and we're gonna do it as a series, because now we had a working engine, and we had some people who had been at the company for a while and were used to kind of work. We can make art and we can do it in a quick and efficient fashion. We're just gonna now go for it. So unfortunately, the one thing that doesn't scale well if you're going to do serialized games, what you have to do is you got to kind of start one, and it takes way more than a month to make a game. So you start one, you get it rolling, and you got your background people come in, they do all those kind of sets and everything, and then the character animators come in and they do the characters after that, and then you got called choreographers would come in and kind of stage all the action, put the cameras where they're going to be. and somewhere in there you would do voice recording, and then eventually it comes out the door. But it's taken 4, 5, 6 months, something like that, to make the game. So meanwhile, you have to start the second one a month later, and then start the third one a month later. And while you can have a group of people who are sort of doing these pieces that only take a month, moving from episode to episode, the guys who are designing and writing and directing them have to pay attention to all of them. And so that snowballed very quickly into a crazy thing for myself and Brendan Ferguson, who was my partner on the first season of Sam & Max. And we would outline an episode. We would do a high level outline in a week, and then we would put in all the puzzles over the next 3 weeks. And that would be the first month of the game. And then the next month, we would be writing the script, but we would also be outlining the second episode. And the third month, we go into production. Now, artists are mostly taking over, but we are directing them. And we are outlining the third episode and writing the script for the second episode, and probably in voice recording for the first episode. So the two of us nearly went insane on that first season of Sam & Max, and we eventually developed some better strategies for doing that, and involved sort of more people and a little more kind of passing the baton back and forth. There would be like, you're going to take this episode, you're going to take that episode, we're going to have a third guy who does the middle episode, and then we're going to go back to you. So sort of a little more team dynamics like that.
That's good. It's many hands make light work, as they say.
Yeah. So at the end of the first season of Sam & Max, they asked me to just direct everything that was going on. So I started doing that, and it was basically, now I was upper management as well as being a game guy. So my hands were a little bit off the games, but I couldn't just let them go. So my world became mostly lots and lots of meetings with the designers and writers who were going to be hands-on on the games, and they would pitch me all the puzzles, and we would workshop them, and sort of, this doesn't feel right, and can you do this again, and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of just like directing the group, and also trying to get the group to function as a group, because people needed to be able to sort of move smoothly from project to project, and they needed to be ways for them to learn from each other. And there's just a whole crazy can of worms of building a design department that was kind of a new thing for me. I've never, I've run projects, I've directed projects, but I haven't tried to direct a department before. So that was interesting, and we made a whole bunch of these adventure games, series after series. Right, there were 3 seasons of Sam & Max, and we did a Homestar Runner in there, and like you said,
Back
Monkey
to the
Island.
Future,
You mentioned Monkey Island specifically, so I'll touch on that. That was a little bit of a weird one, because it sort of came out of left field, because all the discussions about it were really, really secret, to the point where I didn't even know about them for a while. And normally I would be involved in like pitching new properties and stuff like that. It's kind of part of my role there. But the way this went down was Dan Connors just called me in his office one day. He's like, so we're going to do a Monkey Island game. And I was like, really? Okay, how'd you accomplish that? That's pretty interesting. And the people I usually do Monkey Island with are not here. And so how are we going to handle that? And can I call them? And he's like, oh, no one can know. Ink's not dry on the paper yet, so things could still go wrong. You can't say anything, but we got to start. So let's get rolling, pick a team, and start to make things happen. And then eventually, I guess things got firm enough where I was allowed to call Ron, but I couldn't talk to anyone else, because the entire thing was under wraps until release. They didn't want anybody to know that we were even working on it, ever. Which I hate that kind of thing, but so I was like, all right, it's my job. I have to keep it a secret. So I called Ron, and I asked him if he wanted to come and work on it with us, and he was like, can I call you back in a few minutes? I got to go to a room where I can talk. And as it turned out, he had been trying to get the rights himself, and we had scooped him in some way. And so that was not great. And he was working on something else. He was working on Death's Bank, I think, at the time. So he couldn't really leave and do that. But we compromised with, he'll come down for a week and he'll meet with the design team and tell us all the things we're doing wrong, and then go on his merry way. And he did give us some good advice during that week. But the whole thing of just doing that entire project in secret from people who should have known about it, and doing it without them, it just felt weird. It just didn't feel right. But that said, I think we made an interesting addition to the Monkey Island canon there, because the composition of the team had kind of changed from a bunch of kids in their mid to late 20s, sort of riffing on gags and doing, kind of Letterman insults, to a bunch of people who were like in their 30s and 40s, and many of whom had kids and who just kind of had a grown-up perspective on things. And so that feels like the first adult version of Monkey Island to me. It's that season. And, we tried to get into some themes with it. A lot of it was about trust and betrayal and, all this stuff. And there's many of the episodes kind of revolve around getting to know somebody or not being sure if you can trust Elaine. And then LeChuck seems to be a good guy for a little while. So it's always, you're never quite sure where you stand with it. And actually, Morgan Le Fay is one of my favorite Monkey Island characters, really. Because she really felt like a substantive character with some good conflicts and things to say. She was very well conceived and well written, in my opinion. I can say that because I didn't actually write her. So, yeah.
Well, and it's nice she gets to live on kind of in the Monkey Island mythos and all of that. So
yeah,
I played those games. They were really great. I think it was great to have Dominic Armato back as the voice of Guybrush, and it felt like something that was part of that universe. I think you were talking about where it was sort of like we were trying to do it, and maybe there should have been some people on the project and things like that. It was still enjoyable to play. I do like where we're at right now with Monkey Island as a franchise. We'll talk about that here in just a minute, but but no, they were a lot of fun to play, and I was one of those people that absolutely was subscribed and get the episodic kind of content on a lot of those different shows. And I maybe shows is not maybe the way to put it, but it was it did kind of feel that way, because a lot of them, like especially like The Walking Dead and stuff, were very much set up where it was like basically like at the end of the chapter it was like, here's a small recap, and then like based on the decisions you made, a little like a look at the future of what's coming next time. And so it's one of those next week on Mannix, where
Right.
it's selling you like coming back next time, and I always did. So
Yeah.
and again, when things did wrap up, it felt like everything always fell on something where it was like, okay, this is really good, we're at a good stopping place. I'm excited to see what's happening next.
Yeah.
So as someone that a lot of money left my wallet and went elsewhere, it was fine. I felt like every purchase was well made.
Yeah. And that dynamic did change a little bit over the run of the studio, because when we were doing that first series of Sam and Max, there was no trust built up with the audience, and people were sort of very skeptical, very publicly skeptical of this whole idea that we had, that we were gonna make 6 games and sell them to you one at a time. And they were like, oh, you're gonna do 2 and then you'll quit, or you're just trying to chisel more money out of us, or there's a lot of different things. And so because of that, those early episodes had to be completely self-contained. It had to be okay to just pick one up in the middle and play it, and it had to feel like it couldn't have like a cliffhanger at the end where you felt like, oh, I'm not satisfied yet. You did, whatever the episode was about, had to wrap up. And just a few years later, people had, we had done it a few times, and people had kind of gotten the idea of like, oh yeah, this is how it's going to go. And we started selling more and more seasons and fewer individual episodes. We were like, yeah, just, sign me up for the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so then the kind of the goal shifted, and really leaving things in a sort of Perils of Pauline sort of, you really got to be waiting for the next episode, became the order of the day. And so the later seasons all work like that. Then we were always looking for what's the thing that's going to be called a Telltale game later on. Like Kevin Bruner was big on like, that should be a phrase, right? People should say the word Telltale game, and that should mean a very specific thing. We hadn't figured out what that was until The Walking Dead came along, and Sean Vanneman and Jake Rodkin had some ideas for that were like, they weren't new ideas. Like the idea of it's all just branching story, and what you do matters, and it kind of just, it goes like this, expands like this, is something that we talked about my first years in the industry at LucasArts. And I posted a little manifesto about how puzzles should really be opportunities instead of hindrances. And I think it was Hal Barwood took me aside, and he's like, yeah, Dave, we all know that. We all know about branching story and how it could be cool, but we just can't afford to do that, because we're fighting for shelf space, and we have to provide a certain amount of entertainment within a certain budget. And as soon as you start bifurcating the story like that, the cost goes way up. It multiplies by 4 or 5, even if you're cautious about it. It's like, okay, those are good points. And that is why nobody ever does that. But now we had this company, Telltale, which was specifically designing itself for efficiency of production, because we were making these games so fast. And there was a lot of tech behind it, in terms of like, oh, just, if you're setting up this scene, just put the characters in place and press a button, and it'll just throw some random gestures and stuff on them. And, you just press the button a couple times until it gets something that's like, oh, that's not bad. And then you just go in and you do your work, but you've had a head start. And it's like, people are, I think, using AI for this now. And this was much more controlled than AI would be, because all of the pieces that were getting randomized between had been specifically created and designed by artists at the studio. So it wasn't just taking stuff out of left field. It wasn't stealing from anybody or doing anything like that. But it was sort of just throw some stuff at the wall and then make art out of it. It's kind of an approach. I feel like if Telltale started today, it would be an AI company, probably. Maybe.
Well, leverage those tools. I can understand it.
Yeah. Anyway, we had this super efficient studio, and realized that this sort of thing was actually feasible for us. Like, we actually could do the amount of kind of art and camera work and stuff for 4 games, but do it maybe not as cheaply as 1 game, but maybe as cheaply as 2 games, and it's cheaply enough to give it a shot. And certainly the examples of the kinds of situations and choices that these guys wanted to put the player in were really compelling, and that just felt like, okay, yeah, this seems like a thing. But one of the problems with it was it's like, where's the gameplay? People all around the studio were like, well, we don't understand how you play this game, because there's no, there's a little bit of combat and stuff, some button mashing, but there's no puzzle solving, none of this. Like, what's the game? It's like, oh, the choices are the game. But it's hard to see that until you're far enough down the path of development that you can actually play through it and start experiencing these things for yourself. And so we did have to do some things to highlight, not just for ourselves, but to the eventual audience, like, this is what the game is supposed to be. It's your choice is better. And so there was lots of focus on how do we feed back everything that you do in an efficient manner, so that it becomes apparent that that you do matter. and I could go on and on and on. I've done whole talks on how that works, but it's basically there's a lot of kind of short-term feedback of a lot of things, and medium-term feedback of fewer things, and long-term very major feedback on only a few major decisions. And that's how we walk the balancing line between it's possible to make this game and it's engaging to play this game.
Yeah.
And one of the pieces of that is, like you said, the thing at the end where it's like, here's all the stuff you did, here's some stuff that seems like it's probably only going to happen to you or the people who did the same stuff that you did. And that's
I always like that, because it's at the end where you would have a thing where it was just basically like X amount of players chose this, X amount of players chose this, or you could very much tell that it was like, this was maybe a poor decision, maybe I should replay this, or something, or make different choices, because I think there's a lot of interactive fiction title where it's like, I was a kid that grew up reading the Choose Your Own Adventure series and things like that, where you could but I was also one of the kids that had like little scraps of paper that would basically, like, you'd get to a fork and you would flag it, write the pages so you could go back and basically, but I mean, you say where it was just sort of like, like these aren't like action titles, they're not like puzzles. It's this, we're following this story, and I got my hand on the tiller a little bit. I mean, we're going to one place, but how we get there is sort of up to the player, and there's been a lot of that kind of came up in popularity on the heels of Telltale Games and some of those titles. Like Supermassive Games has a couple that are maybe the bigger ones, like Until Dawn, which is basically, it's a game of QuickTime events where you're watching this movie basically play out, and you can and you might influence who lives and who dies, or you might get to there's a couple of different endings, and so based on those decisions you got to wherever that is. And there's another game that they did that's called The Quarry, that is largely, they're horror titles, because it's, that's how they did their engagement. But I mean, in a world of like walking simulators and cozy entertainment and stuff like that, there's plenty of room for just telling a compelling story and giving like the audience like just the tiny influence on it.
I was going to bring up walking simulators, as they sort of pejoratively called, but that was part of the landscape when we were making The Walking Dead. Was that like Gone Home had just come out and was pretty successful, and
Dear Esther, Firewatch, there's a lot of those games.
Firewatch was later, and that was the Walking Dead guys when you made that. That's they left the studio and started their own thing and made Firewatch. So
it's a great game. It's got a great story.
I think was the game they wanted to make for The Walking Dead, and our studio was kind of just not technically equipped to do the quite the same stuff with the environments and so on. Whole first person thing, like we were geared towards making a lot of third person style content, and they did some mock-ups that were first person for Walking Dead that were cool, but that were leaving a lot of stuff on the table that Telltale was really good at. It's ultimately why it wasn't that kind of a game. Yeah,
I get it. Well, as you kind of go through your career, it's always one of those things. It's like, as much as you try to get out, they pull you back in. The section that I've got in my notes here says remastering the classics. So just how did it kind of come to be with because we just had Talk Like a Pirate Day like last week. So it's what kind of came together that it was the decision that was like, hey, we're going to go ahead and we're going to make a remastered version of the Monkey Island games, and then later we're going to remaster Day of the Tentacle, we're going to remaster Full Throttle. Kind of what was the process on that?
So the remasters of the Monkey games, the first one I think was being done while we were working on Tales of Monkey Island, and I think that was mainly because of well, there was Craig Derrick, who is a guy who has been in and out of Lucasfilm a few times, and who is a big Monkey Island fan, and is always kind of supporting us and trying to get things done around that franchise. And also, Lucasfilm used to sort of change presidents about every 2 years, and if you got one who was interested in the adventure game titles, then things would happen. And so that was, I think, what was behind both of the remasters and Tales of Monkey Island happening was, I think it was Daryl Rodriguez, who was the new president at that time. So there was a window of like 2 years where these things were happening. And I didn't have a whole lot to do with any of that. They brought some of the art by the studio, but we didn't get to, sort of tell them what to do or anything. I did do a audio commentary for the LeChuck's Revenge remaster with Ron and Tim. It was the first time the three of us had been together in quite some time, I think. And that, I'm told, is wildly inaccurate. Somebody who knows, Andrew Langley is a guy who I have worked with at Telltale and quite a bit, but who also was part of the vocal fan community in the earlier days of like Mix and Mojo and all these fan sites. He was one of these guys. He played the game, and he says that frequently in the commentary I am saying something and I am misidentified as Ron.
Oh no.
And they put these little icons of the three of us where you can kind of tell who it is, which are pretty fun. They're pretty well done. They're just silhouettes, but you can distinguish between us. But yeah, apparently you shouldn't trust that game as to who is actually making what.
Oh, saying what? That's funny.
Pretty funny. And then the Tentacle one, I think that the day of the Tentacle remaster came, I think, just after I had left Telltale, because I remember my son was just born. He was tiny, and I was sleep deprived constantly. So I was just in a daze for a lot of this process. And Tim called me up one day and he said, "We're going to do this remaster, and how about you come in and let's play through the game together, and we'll record it and we'll put some of it online." And we ended up putting all of it online. It took us about 3 hours to play through the game. We didn't really intend to play through the whole thing, but I think neither of us really knew when was a good place to stop. And so it's just, there's this 3 hour long video of the two of us out there playing through the game, and mostly like being unable to solve our own puzzles and like, what is this about? I don't remember. I'm old now. I can't quite.
I've slept since then.
Yeah, exactly. And then
let me call 1-800 Star Wars real fast. I'll get the tell me the answer.
At the end of that, he took me to another, and he's like, "Here, we got some of the assets from LucasArts. I guess they had started working on this, and they were like, we should get Tim's company to do this instead of us. Why don't you come see these?" And it was weird. It was like 3D versions of Bernard and like the characters walking around. And he said, "What do you think?" And I thought about it. I was like, those are nice and all, but when we first started making this game, what we said we wanted to do was make a Chuck Jones cartoon, make it feel like you walked into a Chuck Jones cartoon. This, why are you not doing that? Why not do that? Just do 2D art, but do it again in a higher fidelity. And behind me, I heard Tim. He leaned over to Matt Hansen, who was the executive producer of everything at Double Fine. Did you hear that? Did you hear what Dave just said? So I think what was going on is the two of them were having an argument, and Matt, being in charge of the company's purse strings, was like, "We should use all these assets." And Tim was like, "I don't like that stuff."
Yeah.
And I think at some point they were like, "Well, Dave's going to be here. Let's just see what he says."
Yeah, I cannot imagine playing a version of the remake. I cannot imagine playing a version of Day of the Tentacle with like 3D modeled, like moving around in 3D space.
Yeah,
I don't know that works. It's
I mean, it would have. It's one of those things where it would have looked okay, but just not right for what it was supposed to be, I think.
Yeah. I agree. I don't know that it could have happened any other way than it happened, because it just looks perfect, and it looks like it feels like how it should have been remade.
Yeah, I agree, and that's to their credit, like they put a lot of time and money into doing that because right there was like, okay, we're gonna redraw all the art from this game, and that's gonna be a big job. So
Yeah.
it was good, and yeah, like you said, I did do the achievements for like the PlayStation or something.
Or the
Which
Steam
was not a thing I
achievements.
normally did. Steam achievements, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all of the remakes have achievements out on the various platforms and things like that. I make a joke about it every so often that it's like, if I ever come into a big pile of money, two things are going to happen. The first one is going to be, we're going to figure out a way to do a remastered version of Sam and Max Hit the Road. That's the first thing. The second thing is, we're going to go back and we're going to add Steam achievements for the Monkey Island remake, because it's the only one that doesn't have achievements. So yeah,
that just seems wrong, doesn't it?
Yeah, it just feels like it was kind of left out. But what I will say is that the achievements
might not even take a huge pile of money. You might be able to do that for a small pile of money.
Well, I'll get the kicks. Okay, I'm writing it down. Start the Kickstarter for achievements for Tale of Monkey Island Remastered. Okay.
Yeah.
But I will say that the achievements and stuff, they're really good, because I think that they do something important that sometimes achievements don't, which is all of the like secret or the hidden achievements and stuff that you can't just directly see out on Steam or on PlayStation Network or whatever. They are rewards for exploring all the dialogue choices, or their reward or their achievements for like trying weird things that you may not normally try. So I think there's an achievement where you get a little sandwich and you give it to Hoagie, and Hoagie eats the Hoagie. So it's like it's cannibalism or something, I think is what the achievement is called.
Yeah.
There's another one where because you have to eventually funnel all of the parts to Laverne to make up Dead Cousin Ted for the human contest, and she puts the chattering teeth in her mouth. So but that's an achievement, but that's something that I played the game a million times and never tried it until I was really actively trying to go out and figure out what some of these weird achievements were. And you read little hints online. It's like, that never occurred to me to do that. And
these
then
games reward curiosity. They all do. And I make a very specific effort to make that happen, where towards the end of the design and or script writing process on anything, I go through with a list of like, here's every inventory item that you can have in the game, and every character and every location. Like, I just try to think about like, what are all the things that are not like on the critical path of solving the puzzle, and that I have not yet specifically added hints to, because a lot of them are like, oh, but if you try this, you should get some more, because this is close idea. There's just like, is this a reasonable idea at all to try? And if so, let's reward it, because I want these games to reward curiosity. An example, there was somebody was playing the second Pajama Sam game. It's about the weather, and there's an Employee of the Month badge that you can get, and it's for a puzzle, but you can give that to like basically anyone in the whole weather complex. And they all have different reactions to it. And the ones that thunder and lightning have a reaction that's particularly funny, that somebody was pointing out online. It's like, oh, I've played this game 100 times. I've never tried this before. And look, I did this, and here's a new thing that I learned. And my personal point of philosophy on this is that I want the games to reward reward people at all different levels. So you get rewarded just for participating, right? You just play the game. You get a bunch of funny lines, and you have a good time. But also, I want to reward curiosity and exploration, and just the deeper you think, like even study. If people are going to really think about the game, I want to seed some things in there that are very, very subtle that you will only notice if you're really specifically looking at them. And I think that's one of the things that makes a title last, is that because that means then if you play it and you replay it, you tend to be getting new things every time, and so it sticks with you, and you're more likely to hand it to someone else, and just sort of makes the thing a lot richer.
Absolutely. And kind of speaking of like the handoff on some of those things, Return to Monkey Island and sort of like getting the franchise back and getting to kind of retell the story. It does retcon a lot of things out, but I just talking with like Dave Fox recently, and just how it's just like that story feels very much a just the growth of all the people that were involved with this franchise over the years. And you've got the very obvious things where, obviously Elaine and Guybrush now have a child, and and he's teaching him kind of the ways of the world and things like that. But it's I don't know. It's just kind of it is one of those things, because it helped introduce a new generation of people to all of these things and reward that curiosity and get them excited about adventuring and this interactive fiction thing that a lot of us grew up loving. But but as somebody that worked on the production, how did you get back involved with that? And
oh man, well, I tell you what, just to sort of put an underline on what you were just saying, like a thing that I said while we were doing Tales of Monkey Island at Telltale was, it's interesting to be working with this property again as an older person. And I said, I think that every decade, Ron and Tim and I should get together and make a new Monkey Island, right? And just to kind of see because these games are always kind of semi-autobiographical in nature. We put so much of ourselves into what's going on with the characters that that it just seemed like it was sort of tracking them would be tracking us, and it would get interesting at about that periodicity. So I never expected that we would have the opportunity to do that at all, though, because of Disney buying Lucasfilm and owning all the rights, and it just seemed like this is there's too many things have to fall in place for there to be another game. But then, I was hanging around in my office one day, and I was at a little bit of a cross. I wasn't working on anything big. I had been doing earplay for some time, and it hadn't really been taking off. And I was trying to figure out, like, okay, what am I going to do with the next 6 months or so? I really need to sort of change things. And I got a chat message on a Slack from Ron, and he said, "Hey, can you talk?" I'm like, yeah. Or actually, I was like, "Hey, are you there?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm here. Can you talk?" And I'm like, "Yeah." "Can you keep a secret?" And I'm like, "I am very good at keeping secrets." Now I am very intrigued. And just as it turned out, he had been approached by this guy Nigel Lowry from Devolver, who he knew from conventions and stuff. And Nigel had this friend John Drake at Disney who was in charge of a bunch of stuff, and they had been talking and been wondering if we would be interested in making a new Monkey Island game. So I go, look, there's somebody in a position of authority over the property is interested, and that's the main thing that it takes. And Ron and I were both free at the same time, and I was just immediately like, great. Let's do this. Yeah. I felt way more ready for it than, at any other time, because every other time Monkey Island has come up as a thing, I'd just be paralyzed by fear of like, we have to compete with the nostalgia, and it's people are going to want us to do a new thing, but have it be the same, and you can't do that, and everybody's going to be disappointed, and it's going to be a disaster. Like, these are the kinds of thoughts that usually go through my head. And not this time. I was like, yeah, I think the time is right. I think we should I think we could do something good. And Ron was a little bit like, well, I don't know. A lot of things still have to fall in place. The deal has to be made, but also we got to be sure that that we know what we're doing. You and I have something to say with this. So I made a trip up there. He was living in Seattle at the time, again, I think, and we spent a couple of days. Just kind of hashing out what we were doing. We were really on the same page about it, that we felt like Guybrush should be a little older now, and we're these sort of aging guys in an industry that's changing, and we thought like that should be reflected in the game. It's like the old school pirates are being pushed out by some new breed, and there was just a lot of ground that we wanted to cover. And Ron also really wanted to address that sort of cliffhanger from the end of LeChuck's Revenge, and sort of take that somewhere. And one of the things that happened was during that couple of days was we brought up a couple things and we discussed them, and then he pitched me his favorite idea, which was what's in the game. It's basically like, we're going to start it like this, and then it's going to be with the kids and go from there. So by the end of that weekend, we were pretty confident that we could make a good game together, and we wanted to do it. So that was January 2020. And the plan had been, we would get together in person every now and then, but that the project was going to be mostly remote. Well, there was patient 0 of COVID hit the Seattle airport 5 days after I was there. So we just sort of barely missed that. Yeah. And we never saw each other in person again until after the project was over. We just did the entire thing remotely, which fortunately is a thing you can do if you're sort of careful about it. And we had both done plenty of remote work, and so we set up an international team, and it was great. But the artists could all be in Europe, and it made meetings a little bit hard to have, but in a way that was good, because it meant we had to sort of meet in the morning and get everything done, and then we would go off and work, and they would sleep, and then they would wake up and they would work, and then by the next meeting we'd have something to talk about. It's a great thing. Anyway, a big challenge with that was, and I think you touched on this, was having it be able to be an introduction for someone to the series, because that was an important thing to us. We don't want people to feel like they have to have played all 5 of the other games first. So it was like, yes, you can start here, and we will recap everything that's important. And so there was, kind of a process of deciding what that meant, what is important, what are the relationships that are important. And it's like, okay, Guybrush and LeChuck and Elaine all have to kind of reestablish themselves in their tentpole roles, but then there's some other minor characters that we had to reintroduce, and we spent some time on Melee Island doing that. And there was a little bit of a balancing act between nostalgia for people who have seen this before in The Secret of Monkey Island, and introduction for people who have not seen it before. That was an interesting line to tread, not entirely unlike that thing about writing for adults and kids at the same time, because you have kind of 2 separate audiences. They both need to be fed, and if you're feeding one of them and not the other, you have to pay attention to that and kind of balance it out.
Absolutely. And I'm a very big fan of the new game. I think it's really great, and just the beginning, the introduction, where it kind of sets things up and introduces you to kind of what the new game world is going to be, and what the humor is it's the same humor, but maybe a little more mature. Even though one of the first jokes is to go into a bathroom and look in the toilet and all of that. But the characters are kids there. Yes, they are. So it's acceptable. It's acceptable for them to do those things.
Yeah, but grown-up Guybrush, that joke doesn't work. But
yes, but it absolutely works for the kids. But yeah, no, I played through it and really enjoyed it. And I remember as kind of things got on, and no spoilers. The game is still out there, available for sale, and I highly recommend to anybody watching, if you have not played it, to pause this video, go complete the game, and then come back for the rest of this conversation. But as a dad, and as someone that grew up playing those games and loving all of that, it felt very personal, and it felt like that there's this growth, and you get to see these people that have in one way have moved on, but in another way, like with Elaine Marley, where it's like, hey, like I used to be the governor and that was fine, but now I'm doing this other thing. I'm helping deal with scurvy in the
Right.
Caribbean, and and I'm helping people, and this is my new thing.
She's like an
And
ex-president kind of a character, I think. Yeah.
yes, and so it's and then you have a Guybrush who's like somebody that's trying to maybe relive part of his past, and at the end you realize what's important in his life.
Mhm.
And how much of it is just the story, how much of it is stuff that really happened, how much of it is him telling the next generation that you can't look at this from the point of view that there's going to be like some big thing that you've pinned all your hopes and dreams on.
Mhm.
That life and that all of this stuff is largely what you make it.
Mm.
And that, at least that's my takeaway. I could be 100% wrong. You could be like, no, that's not it at all, and that's fine. But you're wrong.
Oh well, as with
but
all great art, you can really read into it what you
Yes.
like, and we specifically, it's especially easy with a game where there are different paths you can have, and at the end of the game there are some different choices that you can make that mean different things.
Mhm.
And so, the audience just kind of gets to pick what it means to them. But certainly that theme
Mhm.
of sort of nostalgia and what is the big thing and what's the secret,
Yeah.
dropped right out of like decades of people asking Ron constantly, like, what is the secret of Monkey Island?
Yeah.
So that's where
I like the fact that you can get all the way, you can tow right up to the end of the game and not learn the secret and go on with your life anyway.
Yeah.
I like the fact that you can absolutely just that it's what you make it, and without revealing the ending, without giving anything away, that it feels like that it's what you want it to be. So
for quite some time internally, just between like us and Devolver and Disney, we were talking about the game with a sort of imaginary tagline of, let me tell you about the time I didn't find the secret of Monkey Island. And then at some point that changed to, oh no, but now you are going to find the secret.
yes.
But it might not be what you expected. It's yeah, back and forth a lot.
No, I just love it. I think it's really great. I think everybody should play it. It's
I'm
I
really
hope that there's
pleased with
more to come.
myself. It's my new favorite. I feel like it's my best work. Yeah.
I love the art style. I know that at first that people were kind of like this is a departure, but it's like it grew on me, and I was like, yeah, this is fine. This is a game about change. This
It
is
was
a
one
game
of those
about
internet things, actually, where a few very vocal people said nasty things about the art, and everyone worried about, like, oh no, is this the thing? And we knew that there would be a little controversy over it, because we were changing the style, and which I will point out, the art style of Monkey Island has changed every single time there's been a new Monkey Island game.
Yes.
It always changes. So
yes.
please don't be surprised by us picking a new one. We'll do that again next time too, and it might take some adjustment there too. But yeah, that was the thing where Rex Crowell had done a drawing. I think it was just a drawing of Guybrush or something at some point several years previously, and Ron had found it and liked it and put it on like his screensaver or something like that. And so when the opportunity came up to, like, okay, we're gonna do the game, he was like, maybe I could just get Rex to do the art for the game. That'd be a good thing. So we did talk about doing pixel art, but neither of us thought that was a good idea.
No, what is in the final game is really, really great.
We did not want to sort of pigeonhole it either as a this is a retro game, because it isn't. It's really we changed a bunch of stuff about the interface and stuff too, to modernize it. Some people were like, you should go back and do text verbs at the bottom of the screen. But I feel really good about where we landed with the sort of the exploration of the interface. If you're playing with a mouse, you kind of wave it around, and things are coming up that aren't just sort of mechanical opportunities, but that are also revealing story and character. They're sort of showing you the inside of Guybrush's mind at all times, and I like that a lot. our hint system is particularly good, and I like
Yes.
we have a recap system where, you know, if you just sort of pick the game up and you power through it, you wouldn't even see this. But if you put it down for a week and you come back, then
Yes.
when it starts up again, it gives you a little recap from the point of view.
I like how it's. Do we need to talk about what happened previously? And you can be like, no, it's cool. It's cool, Dad.
Yeah, exactly. Sounded almost like Dominic right there.
Yeah. I had a great interview with him. He is a hoot, as they say in the Midwest.
Dominic is a fun guy to be around. Yeah, it's true. Get him to take you to dinner and then let him talk about the food for as long as he wants to. And it's super fun.
Yes, he's and I talked to him a little bit about outside the interview, just about being a food critic and being a foodie and stuff. And that was another hour conversation on top of our video. But I hope to meet him one day. I know that there's been this trend now for more fan conventions for different gaming and things like that. So maybe at get everybody together at next year's there's a adventure gaming fest that they've started up. There was one last year, had a lot of Sierra people. It'd be great to meet some LucasArts people at the next one. So but
Tom is also an amazing actor. Because he got involved after the first two games, which were not full voice talkies, and because I was not around for the studio sessions for Tales, my first experience with him in the studio was on Return to Monkey Island, and we did like 9 or 10 sessions with him. There's a lot of dialogue in these games, 13,000 lines, something. It's a lot, and half of that is him. And he is just so, he has an understanding of Guybrush as a kind of a quiet baseline for everything else to bounce around. And so he instinctively gives you that quiet baseline, but he can also give you 9 variations on that baseline if you ask for them. And it's just so subtle. It's like, wow, that's, he's in control.
No, he's a great voice actor. I do some voice acting and stuff, and I'm an actor on the side when I'm not doing this. And so I was like, hey, as an under 5, what advice do you have for me on some of these things? And smart guy. Again, it was like talking to an old friend. So I could see why he's so well liked. But well, let me ask you this: what's next? What's the next big thing you're working on?
Oh, I'm very slowly working on something. I got a lot of life happening at the moment, but I have been plugging away on a game which is about people believing everything they read.
Oh, that can't be based on what's actually happening in our world right now. But
it wasn't going to be, and the more
it wasn't supposed to be prescient, but
the more, and this is inevitable with me. I think current events just kind of influence my thinking on things, and so I think there will be some parody of some of the things going on at the moment. But I had to be careful. I don't want anything to be too timely, or it becomes dated. So I try to identify what are the elements of whatever is going on that are sort of human nature that never changes, and point those up. So I'm doing some design and concept work on that, and I've been working with one of the artists from the Monkey Island project, and it's looking good, but it's not going to be done for another year or two. So.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. Maybe when you get closer to finishing things up, maybe we can get back together and talk about it.
Sure. I imagine I will be trying to talk to as many people as possible.
We're getting the word out.
Get the word out, yeah.
Dave, thanks so much for taking time today. I know I kept you a lot longer than kind of what we originally discussed, but I
warned you I might ramble.
No. Again, this is these folks and myself were the target audience for all these great stories. So I really appreciate you taking time. I got one final question. It's a callback to something that you mentioned earlier, but who is your Maniac Mansion dream team of kids? If you got to pick.
Okay, so now you're talking about a game that I played 30 years ago.
It's a game I play every 6 months, but it's fine.
So wait, you only get you only get 3. Is that right?
You
have
pick 3
Dave
kids. Yeah.
plus 2 others.
Yes. You have to pick Dave. There's no choice
Yeah.
but to pick Dave.
Yeah. I think I do go with Bernard and Razor as my other 2 kids, and that's probably why they were in the mix for Day of the Tentacle to begin with, is that they seemed like the ones that we wanted to play with. Was it Michael? Was he the photographer character?
Yeah, Michael's the photographer.
It's like a a desperate attempt to it's like, oh, he's got one specialty.
Yeah.
To get people to pick him, but I just
Wendy's a writer. She's got that one thing because her whole deal is being able to go and get the book deal for the Meteor, and get him booked on the talk shows and stuff.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. No, I'm going with Bernard and Razor.
All right, those are good picks. So, Dave, thanks so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks. It's a pleasure being here.